people, or is it including focus groups?
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. I was just looking back at some of my notes from when I did research in Karnataka 10 years ago. And it's interesting to see the comments of people, very low income, and the benefit to their lives.
Okay.
What is the news on the Water Academy?
Yeah, it is up and functioning. Yes, yeah. It has been founded about 4 months ago.
Oh, good.
And they have started functioning. Number of courses are being organized, and it has got its own, corporate office building.
Ah, excellent.
Yeah, it's in full swing.
Full swing.
We are hopefully doing a tie-up with ASCII.
Good.
To do the structured training programs on
excellent. Yep. I've always enjoyed working with ASCII over many, many years. Yes.
Mr. Chari, you should respond. The hopefully should change. Good evening, sir.
I was looking for Professor Chari. And,
yeah, I'm waiting for him to respond. He's not. So, Professor Chari, please.
No, we will definitely do it. I mean, we don't need to take people to Singapore and Israel and Malaysia that we used to do. Now we will go to Puri and Orissa.
Yeah, indeed.
I welcome Tara ma'am. Despite her busy schedule, I see her. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, are we starting?
Yeah, we'll be starting in another 2-3 minutes, exactly at 5.
Okay.
Chari, did you see my message recently?
Which one, Richard?
Yeah, did you see my message? I have to run away to collect my wife in the midst of things.
No, I didn't see that.
Okay, that email. Something went wrong with the arrangements.
Till what time would you be around, Mr. Richard? We
the
QA at the end, so I can shift that a little bit, please.
Well, the plan is I will do the presentation in the agenda we have, and then, depending on whether there's direct questions, run away for 20 minutes and then get back.
Okay, that's perfect, because we'll have the QA by the time.
Good.
Hello, good evening to all of you. I am Colonel Naresh.
Naresh, how are you?
All well, sir. All well, sir. Fine, thank you, sir.
So, Dr. Mani, over to you.
Yeah, Professor Chari, I'm ready to start. It's on dot. Shall we?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, perfect. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Malini. I'm a faculty member at Administrative Staff College of India, and on behalf of my organization, I welcome all the delegates to today's webinar. As you know, ASCII has launched the Change Management Forum, which is a peer learning network, peer learning platform for practitioners. This Change Management Forum is started with an objective to support the implementation of reforms in Indian urban water and sanitation sectors. The CMF aims to provide support through providing networking opportunities, through research, sharing research findings, customized information and knowledge support, building partnerships, etc. Many of you have reached out to us for membership. We are grateful to you. We are just working out the contours of the membership. We need another couple of weeks, and we will reach out to each one of you who's written to us and all the members who are there in today's webinar and the previous webinar as well. So as part of the bouquet of services under the Change Management Forum, we have the leadership webinars. The first in the series of this webinar was held last month. It was on 24/7 water supply is achievable in urban areas, and we had some wonderful presentations. Of course, we took a historical perspective of how 24/7 has been evolving in India and what are some of the best practices, leading practices to learn from. We had presentations from Orissa, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and also global experiences shared. In today's webinar, we are going to focus on removing the entry barriers for the poor and vulnerable for achieving universal access to household water tap connection. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers, and we will introduce them to you shortly. Sharon, can you go to the next slide, please? So there's a lineup, and I will request Procedural later on to introduce them briefly to you. Next, please. Next one. Yeah, thank you. So just want to share with you that today the webinar, of course, many of you have joined here in the Zoom platform, but it's also being played live on YouTube, and there are many participants there. I welcome all the participants from the different countries who are attending this. And it's fabulous to see that majority of the participants are government officials from 14 countries across the world. And we do hope this network keeps growing. Next slide. I also take this opportunity to announce next month's webinar, which would be the third in the series. The next webinar would be on innovative technologies for effective waste management. This would also be followed by an exhibition in the month of January in Hyderabad, and we will reach out to you where you can come and see the innovations, interact with the innovators, and see how you can implement them in your cities and states. If you by any chance missed the last webinar, then that is available on the YouTube link. Just go to YouTube channel of urban_ASCII. Or you can write to us, we'll be happy to share the recording with you. Next, please. So with that, I'm going to request my senior colleague and director of the Center of Environment and Urban Governance, ASCII, Professor Chari, to share with us the types of barriers and the gravity of these barriers for us to achieve universal access to household water tap connections, and also to briefly introduce the speakers as he goes by and set the context for today's webinar. So over to you, Professor Chari.
Thank you, Dr. Malini. Can you hear me? Just to
Yes, yes.
Perfect. So thank you, friends. Thank you for joining, and I would like to particularly thank Ram and Mr. Mathwatanan, as well as Dr. Richard Francis and all the other panelists, Ms. Natasha, for joining at a very short notice. Now, the theme of today's discussion of having individual water tap connection at home is extremely relevant as we speak, particularly from the national mission, Jal Jeevan mission, as we say, because the Jal Jeevan mission is primarily promoting a unique mission, which is promoting individual water tap connection. It is no longer right to water, but right to tap connection at home. And that's what we understand from the draft. And there is a very ambitious plan of rolling out by 2024. Every household in urban areas would have access to a tap connection with quality water. Now, having said that, there is no need to discuss, or it's actually needless to say, the benefits of having individual water tap connection. It's a no-brainer However, I just like to amplify that this is not something that is discussed now. It's actually discussed way back in 1949. One of the the major committees constituted at the national level by Government of India, wherein it has articulated some of the key benefits, which we continue to discuss even now. Having a tap at home is not only a convenience, it saves time, it is economic benefits, it reduces drudgery for women and girls, it reduces losses, it actually reduces non-revenue water because we phase out public stand posts. It also brings in greater accountability. So these benefits are not something that we need to research, continue to research. It's already been researched in 1949 and clearly articulated some of these benefits. Now, having said that, what is a ground reality? And that's where I think the studies carried out by us are very, very important to highlight. And that's where I think this conversation is all about. When we looked at a data set of 140 plus cities, we found that the household access to individual tap connection, it means tap at home, is about 51%. While we say access to water as 90+%, India has done a phenomenal progress. But if you look at the data set, it's about just about 51% in terms of having a tap at home. Now, similar analysis is done by several studies, including the National Sample Survey, which said over 90% of the poor in urban areas do not have access to tap connection at home, but they depend on public stand posts and hand pumps. Now, this, if we want to demystify this, we need to look from the lens of a typical engineering perspective. And I would like to bring to you how a municipal engineering looks at this problem of household, of this coverage. Typically, we have what is called a physical coverage. It means the network is provided with, which is also called network coverage or physical coverage. And then we have what is called household coverage. Now, every household in this domain of physical coverage need not be connected to an individual tap connection. In fact, many households are not connected to this physical coverage, and that's why the numbers are little low. That's why the numbers are around 51% from the data set that we looked at. So it means, what are they doing if they're not connected to a network? It doesn't mean they don't get water, but they depend on a shared connection, or they may have, some of them may have illegal connections, but majority of them, especially the poor, are on public stand posts. That's exactly what Tara ma'am and the national mission is going to change this scenario. And to change this scenario, we need to really understand some of the roadblocks for changing this scenario. And that's what Orissa has done. And that's what Chhattisgarh has done. And we need to promote this across all 36 states and union territories. Now, let me also present to you some data set. This is live. These are 3 prominent cities, very popular ODF plus players, national recognition. They're very nice cities, model cities. But I would like to look from the lens of water in this case. Now, this city 1 has 48,000 households, but they have 9,700 connections, coverage of 20%. And the municipality and the public health engineering department has declared these cities as 100% coverage. And this data also got reported in the 15 Finance Commission portal, because there is a service level benchmarking reporting system that we have. Now, what happens to the remaining population households? How are they managing? As I said, it could be they are dependent on the neighbor's tap. The same tap is shared between multiple families, but equally important, these cities have a number of public stand posts. However, it is classified as covered. Now, this has to change if you want to have individual tap connection. Now, to understand how to change, what we did was, and this is what we would like to share with all of you, post this webinar, we scanned the data, the policies and procedures of house water tap connection of all 36 states and union territories. And we could locate 34 states have policies or procedures or government orders on individual tap connection. That's good news. But when we start analyzing the data, when we start reading these orders, we found 5 critical barriers. We need to address these barriers as part of our reform agenda under the national program, as well as part of our commitment to sustainable development goals. First and the foremost one is high connection cost. We often call it as entry fee. Now the cost of connection, when we looked at the cost of connection data from these government orders, it has a very interesting set of connection cost. There's an application fee, there's a registration fee, there is a major component called donation, which is basically donation for capex recovery. Then there's a meter cost wherever it is feasible. There's a road excavation cost, labor charges, pipeline charges, and security deposit. Some of the states ask for security deposit of 3 months of the tariff as advance to get access to connection. So if you add up all these costs, it varies from state to state and city to city. But by and large, if you add up all this cost, it is coming to about 15,000 rupees or more as an average connection cost for an individual to gain access to a tap connection in the cities, in urban and urban areas. I'm not talking about rural. Now, interestingly, there is a state variation, like Orissa has 100 rupees as a connection. Tripura has 0 charge, first time charge. Mizoram has 500 rupees, but actual road cutting charges, which could vary from 7,000 to 10,000. Andhra Pradesh and Jharkhand have 7,000 rupees as plus actual cost of road cutting pipeline charges. It can go up to 20,000 if you add up all that. So this is one entry barrier for individuals to access connection. Now, this entry barrier, some states have thoughtfully have addressed for the poor. 14 out of 36 states and union territories have notified what is called pro-poor connection cost policies. This is important for us to look at. So we have the whole data set of which state has what is a connection cost for the poor. For example, Andhra Pradesh is 7,000 rupees is a connection for the APL families, but 200 rupees for the BPL families. Likewise, Tripura has 0 charge for both APL as well as BPL charges. Whether it is right or wrong, that's not the debate, but they have addressed the entry barriers for the poor on the connection cost. Rajasthan has a different data set. You have to deposit 3 months of advance tariff as an entry point, for gaining access. So there is a variation. Good news is that 14 out of 36 states have already introduced pro-poor connection cost policies. This data needs to be validated again and again, but this is the data which we compiled pretty recently from various sources. The second important barrier, friends, and this is another area where we need to address as part of the reform agenda, is the procedural and documentation related barriers. Now, there are tedious procedures and documentation requirements which hinder the poor to gain access to tap connection. For example, we need to have application form, address proof, resident proof. In some cases, they call it as NOC from certified plumbers. Goa request for affidavit on a stamp paper, floor-wise plan, property tax is a uniform requirement, NOC certificate if the applicant is a tenant. So these are complicated procedures sometimes, can hinder the progress we envisage, the accelerated progress that we envisage in the days to come. So we need to sort of simplify these procedures. I will come to some of the recommendations later part, but that's not, and the recommendations will come from today's discussion and from Mati sir as well as Tara ma'am and Dr. Richard and all of us. The third important aspect which I would draw attention to as a barrier for the poor is the land tenure issue. Now, considerable ambiguity is currently prevailing on issuing water connection for non-notified slums. Most states that we have researched do not have a clear policy procedure on right to water tap, which is de-link from land tenure. To some extent, Swachh Bharat Mission tried to de-link toilet and land tenure issue. I think we are fairly successful. I think we need to sort of have a de-linking mechanism of land tenure and water tap connection. This is another reform, probably it's already thought through, but I'm just highlighting the information from the ground. Fourth roadblock, and which can be easily addressed, is access to credible information with regard to connections. How do I get connection? Most of them, we scanned all of the data. Information is scanty right now. Aggressive dissemination is required, which is not missing, which is missing currently. Online application is available for some states and some municipalities, but even now in-person application for connection is a requirement. Online payment is all right with regard to the tariffs, but when it comes to new connection, there is in-person contact, which can be, so no single window system or own your tap campaigns are not properly done in this case. So the typical time for gaining connection is in the range of 30 to 90 days officially, which is, I think is not a decent timeline. I think it can be shrunk quite a bit. Finally, weak incentives to connect the poor. Municipalities have no credible incentives to serve the poor because the incremental cost expenditure for every new connection they give, a municipality gives, they lose money. So there's no clear incentives, and states, most of them, and national level fiscal incentives are very, very important on the connections. I'm sure JJ Mission has thought about it. It's already articulated as an outcome-based incentive. So, but more or less states have not incentivized the municipalities and local governments to serve the poor. Chhattisgarh is an exception where they provide 3,000 rupees. They used to provide 3,000 rupees for every new connection they give it to a BPL family as a state incentive for the municipality. So if I give 100 connections this month, I get 100 into 3,000 rupees as a state incentive, so that municipalities have an incentive to serve the poor, which covers the road cutting charges and pipeline charges. This is the same situation even for metropolitan cities. So we have the data set of all the gel boards, the Hyderabad, Chennai, Bangalore. So they too have certain complicated processes which we can, which needs to be addressed. Now, this is not an academic conversation. Some of the states in the past have addressed these problems. All the 5 problems that I discussed, this is no longer academic. In fact, in 2009, Chhattisgarh government has introduced what is called Jal Jeevan, the Bhagirathi Jal Jeevan Yojana, which was primarily aimed to simplify the procedures, delinking land tenure and connection cost, paying 3,000 rupees as an incentive to serve the poor, campaigns at each and every gully and mohalla level as own your tap campaigns, simplifying the procedures for slum areas. So there are examples, there are great examples of the past. And now we have recent examples of Chhattisgarh, Orissa is doing it at a statewide. In fact, you would be happy to know, but a simple policy has enabled 2.5 lakh connections in 1 year. It started in Durg, and then it scaled up, Bhilai and Durg, and then it got scaled up across the state, 2.5. So a policy of delinking land tenure, a policy of incentivization, a policy of simplifying, giving new connections can catch like wildfire, and that's what has happened. And individuals have taken with a metered connection with the tariff, the poorest of the poor. This is the story of 2010-11. Now things have changed. Things are much better now. Orissa and other states have set an example. I close my opening remarks by saying that when a mobile has a process, mobile connection, despite having security issues, they have simplified the process so much that poorest of the poor can have access to a mobile connection. There is no tariff or there is no connection cost on the SIM in India. It's all built in the tariff. Can't we think on the same lines? Can't we simplify it? I know that water infrastructure is a lumpy investments. Cost recovery is important, but why cost recovery only from the poor? Can't we have a better mechanisms, national mechanisms, international mechanisms, where we financially sustainable the operation and maintenance and O&M, but also remove these entry barriers? That's a conversation today. It's a little longish introduction, but I think it's important to give the story about this cost of connection and the barriers for the poor to become universal access to tap connection. On this, with this, I will stop, and I would now invite Tara ma'am, the Joint Secretary, who is leading Amrut as well as Jal Jeevan Mission draft urban side, who is going to define the rules of the game for the urban water sector. And she has served in number of capacities as well as a municipal commissioner of Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. She comes from the grassroots experience to policy experience, so she knows quite a bit of operational issues. So with this introduction, I would now request Tara ma'am to give her remarks keynote. Over to you. Friends from ASCII, you need to help. I hope you are not unmuted. She's able to.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I didn't prepare presentations and all. I'm just running from one meeting. We just had a meeting. Matisa was also there. So we're coming to another. I think it's the biggest challenge we are facing. Completely, totally agree with your introduction that I just was telling the states that you have reported completion of so many projects, but the outcomes have not been completed out of those projects. Just now, the gap between what they should have done and what they have done is around 12 lakh connections nationally. So from the data I picked up, which are the projects which are completed and why you have not done connections. So I think it's very, it bothered me, and in fact it was taken out and seen. See, the most important thing is, I was just thinking, okay, water connection, providing water connection, can it be simplified? First of all, it should be incentivized. So in Jal Jeevan, we are not calling it Jal Jeevan Mission anymore, we are calling it Amrut 2. Amrut 2, so you may change, and Honorable Prime Minister is launching it on October 2nd. So that's also fine. So all of you are welcome to participate virtually and go through that whole this thing. The most important thing is, I was just wondering, as a municipal commissioner also, when I worked and when I'm here working also, I found it very, very interesting that we all think providing a connection to a poor, or for that matter, providing a connection is a costly affair. The pipe and the... But if you don't provide a connection, I always asked one question to my people when I joined as municipal commissioner. So you have 12.5 lakh households in the city as you enumerate. You are only reporting 10 lakh connections. So that does mean that 2 lakh people are not drinking water. They do, right? I mean, that question, I said, there's no way anybody would be without drinking water. So either they have illegally taken, or somebody has charged them twice to give an illegal connection, or, I mean, people really don't go to another house to fetch water, even in a slum or even this thing. They do sort of take connections because they are the plumbers. Remember, they are the people who are skilled to tap into pipeline and take this thing. So I have seen very beautiful artwork in many of these Charleston slums, that a pipe has been, dug and put from below, above, and it's like almost like a modern artwork if you sort of dig it and see it. So it's a very complex this thing. A simplest solution is, how do you incentivize giving connections? So today, that is why we said in Amrut 2, it is outcome based. We are not bothered whether you put pipe or not. If you are able to provide tap and water without putting pipe, still we would like to pay you. So we have said that you put up the connection, we will pay you per tap connection money. And also we have said that at least 40% of the money will come even for projects when you provide the tap connections, not when you complete the project in terms of passing the final bill. This is a paradigm change from where we were running machines to where we have reached. I just want to know, okay, how do we discover the gap also? Today, how do you discover the gap? I was just thinking, how do you discover the gap? Can we start a missed call campaign? Can we ask the citizens to give a missed call if you don't have a tap connection and we will respond? I mean, that's something which I was always thinking, and I mean, it will be, I cannot put it on a policy note. I will ask them for a missed call campaign, but I may suggest to the states to go for a missed call campaign and find out who are not having water connections. And if you really look at it, it's a untapped demand and untapped payments which are pending. If you are able to give them, say, at a very affordable cost. We have done that in Ahmedabad when I was municipal commissioner. I said, 500 rupees leke connection de do. Not free, but 500 rupees. Don't ask any questions. In fact, we changed a lot of pipelines within the Charleston slums, which were otherwise done. So it's very important because the disease load of a city is dependent on this. I totally agree with you. As you were speaking, a lot of thoughts went through my mind. I think one of the mandatory reforms I'll put in the document, though we have said, how are you going to, how many household, if you look at a water balance plan document, it is asking for how many poor households are there, how are you going to cover, what is the gap, how are you going to provide. I mean, this usually in the documents, we don't ask for these numbers, but now we are asking. But I'm going to put in one thing, a mandatory reform as simplifying the water connection and sewer connection and bringing in startups or a app to provide water and sewer connection in the simplest manner possible. And give a, as I told you, I have already put in the document. I don't think in Government of India document this has ever been put. But we have insisted, in fact, it was the collective thinking of Government of India that anyway, everything should be outcome based. And I'm willing, like there is one amount which we have taken as the amount for providing water connections through a project. But there will be another amount which will be even if you have done it through your grants. But if it is above the baseline as we establish, as per census or as per Amrut, then above that, if you have done your water connections, that means even if you have made it efficiently through the existing pipelines, we would want to provide money per water connection. So that probably will take care of this problem. So the mission pushes towards as many water connections as you can give, I can pay you for that. So that has been taken care of in this mission. We will still distill it and curate it in that manner and give it because that helps. Second is you make it as easy, ease of living. If you can give a water connection, a house in the name of a lady, you can say that if anybody gives you a missed call, you get back and attend to the water connection of that house. And if you have done that, we will pay you this much. That could be this thing, but there should be partnership. There should be some payment from the person also. It could be 200, it could be 500, whatever. Because today people pay more for, cable TV than for water across India, whether it is rich or poor or whoever. I mean, we are not willing to stay without Tata Sky or any other channel, or OTT, but we are willing to pay for that, but we don't have this concept of paying for water. So slowly that also needs to come up. But I think it's very important to add as many households to this thing as possible. So 10, 15. So then I would, so that is something which I recognize. As I told, I will put it in the mission document. How do you actually change the this whole connection business, both sewer and water? Again, sewer is a high issue. I mean, water is still simpler. See, water is still simpler. You put a pipe, it doesn't require levels and you can still give the connection. Sewer connection involves building a small manhole within the household from where the connection can go into the line. So that again involves money. Now, can we look at a fabricated structure to bring in that ease of putting it and cost effectiveness? Is again we can think of it, because all said and done, this cannot be thought as simple as a charity game. This is I mean, water, laying water pipeline, providing water, getting water out of the house and treating. It's a high engineering, complex engineering business. It's not a, emotion-based business. So I think that is another thing which I want to say. Another thing which I found is the space in the slum. See, I always wonder how can an individual slum household connection be given? In real slums, when I say real slum, those slums which you see in, say, every city as it goes higher, if you look at the city size and as it becomes a bigger and bigger metropolis, you will see the slum per capita household space is smaller and smaller. Literally very small. And the access is also very, very difficult. Now, how do you attend to that? Can we bring in new technology? How do we bring in that? I sometimes have thought, this is totally what I've done in my experience. I always thought, let the water pipe go above the ground level, so that there are no illegal connections. So I couldn't try it very well, but I always ask these engineers, don't put the water line under the ground. Put it above at your this thing. It is possible. Nothing is impossible. In fresh water, you can do it. So again, how do you innovatively bring in laying pipelines? Why should it go under the ground? Why can't it be above the ground? Can we think a little more innovatively? Can we put, you need to build a slightly higher small tank there, and then from there the water goes. So it's not a problem. When the last mile connectivity is there, it's not a problem of only giving money, etc. Again, yes, I agree. It is not only for water connection. So many issues. There are so many documents asked for. So we will introduce ease of doing business or ease of living as one of the mandatory reforms very clearly in the draft guidelines, that you have to follow this. That water connection giving and sewer connection, these should be really people friendly. It cannot be free, but it cannot be so taxing that the cost itself becomes a barrier to lay the others. And you're very true that even today there are lines, but there are no connections. Because if you can get it in 1,000 rupees free connection, why would you take it's not that those houses are not connected, Chariji. On your book, they are not connected. They are definitely connected. The only thing is the way they are connected is very interesting. Right? So there is this gray market, there is some black market, and there is white market. So even in water connections, they exist. So the policies and the incentive should be to change that. Because what happens is this money goes into somebody's pocket, and operation and maintenance charges are not met. They're so much less met by other people, the poor people. And the poor people pay 900 or 1,000 rupees as health expenditure per head, indirectly, directly, for this kind of connection, which creates a lot of other problems in terms of quality of water. So I think what Mathivanan sir has done is to provide at low cost with low entry barrier connections to people. And I think we will encourage that as a part of design. We've already put it. The more connections you give, and especially to slum households, you'll get more money. Low economic households. And we are not bothered about the ownership. We have said land ownership or land title is not the basic this thing. It is very clearly written. You need not worry about the ownership. Giving a water tap connection doesn't give you ownership. So this, anyway, in Ahmedabad also, in slums also, you have water connections without ownership. So that barrier has been crossed in some cities because they are really voters of the municipal corporation elections or so on and so forth. So usually that barrier is crossed. What is not crossed is providing a functional connection at a household level because of one, the site issues. Two, this whole business has been dealt in the business as usual manner. This is why we have said we are going to get startups directly funded through the mission to bring in and implement their ideas. This is another thing which we have brought in very boldly. We said at the city level, 20 lakh rupees can be given to a startup to demonstrate what they want to demonstrate in water sector. Any higher, it may come to at the state level, of course. City means at the state level, which cities can be. And any higher amount, it can come to central level. And we put 200 crores apart for that intervention. And we've also said that If you have innovative technologies of providing clean water, attending to the challenge of water supply, last mile connectivity, we are willing to refund after your solution works for any innovative technology deployed by any company, international, national. And that reimbursement, I think, is around 50 lakhs or 25 lakhs each. I mean, so somebody wants to spend 1 crore of rupees and get a reimbursement on when the works, it is also possible where there's no tender route. See, these two things we have brought in. The third thing we are bringing in is, we are telling, make the last mile connectivity as part of your project cost. This is another thing which we are very keen on, so that you don't factor it in. You collect it through time from the person. You don't upfront load it, but you can collect it through time from the person. That's another angle which we are bringing in to the mission. So these are some of this thing, but you know, it's a wonderful. It is actually helping us to think further. I think we need to bring in ease of connections as one of the major reforms, both sewer and water, and ensure that this is implemented. In fact, as I'm talking, I'm thinking I'll change that and put it in the MOU, which is to be signed by all the cities for getting into this mission, as one of the mandatory commitments which they give for bringing in. So that's all about it. I think we can have a.
Yeah.
So these are thoughts.
This is fantastic, ma'am. I think it's absolutely, I mean, all your initiatives are spot on and probably removes the historical challenges that we have. One is, I think, projectizing the connection cost as a part of the. I think it's a great initiative. It is not an add-on that the burden is on the municipalities. I think that's a fantastic one. Simplification of procedures, as you said, single window systems and simplifying procedures. I think, and most importantly, outcome-based financing, particularly focusing on the connections, I think is again a very, very bold initiative. I'm sure these ideas would go a long way. I think what we plan to do is, as an outcome of this conversation, we will summarize a one-page note as a recommendations or discussions we will share with you, so that some of these ideas can also be factored in the guidance document that you will be releasing. Now, you raised a very important point. Why can't the network be above the ground? I think we have seen in many slum areas and many international experience where the network is not actually at much above the ground, but at least on the ground, it's easy to connect, easy to manage operation and maintenance. So there are examples of that nature. So I think this is the right time to bring Dr. Richard Francis. Richard Francis is a leading water and sanitation expert, old connect, done 30 years of work in the area of water and sanitation, and now is advising IRC and working with UNICEF IRC consortium. I request him to speak about how other countries have addressed some of the points that Tara ma'am has just mentioned. Not just about developing world, but also emerging economies, some of the African countries. How have they dealt with entry barriers? Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Chari, and thanks for this opportunity. Global experience is in fact very similar to what you've been describing so far. The same sort of barriers to access, the same sort of challenges for households, the same challenges to institutions. Where do they get the money from? How do they account for connection fees? The textbooks from World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank make quite clear, although you can see some interesting formulae there, they say very clearly that connection subsidies are less distorting than consumption subsidies. So better to really subsidize getting people connected if we are short of funds, rather than ongoing subsidizing operating expenditure. Very clear messages there. Looking just, for example, from one utility in England, what are the sort of costs involved and how do they build up? This particular utility now has application fees, connection charges for actually doing the pipe work and putting a ferrule on the main, infrastructure charges, which is their way of charging for each new connection part of the fixed asset base to be built up to the right level in order to deliver water to these new connections. And then a new one on me, income offset allowance, recognizing that because this new connection is going to bring in a lot of revenue for the water company over the years, they can offset it in some way. Also making allowance for water efficiency. The connection fee is going down, the more efficient you can make the units and water consuming entities in the household. And so this particular one, we can see this total example here. On the right-hand side, the water efficient fixtures, you have a 90% reduction.
The slides are not moving.
Richard, your slides are not.
Not at all.
No.
That's disappointing. I like my slides.
No, we can run it if you're okay with it.
Is it? Can you see anything now?
No, nothing's moving. Sayan, do you have a copy of the PPT?
Yes, ma'am.
He's got an old. He has an old copy.
Oh,
But it's unusual not to.
maybe you could just close and try one more time, Richard.
Okay. Yes. I was enjoying seeing it from my end.
So with technology, when we don't know what to do, we just close and restart.
I understand. I think maybe, what's this one? Anything at all? What can you see at the moment?
Yeah, perfect.
Is it working?
Yes.
Yes, you can go back.
So I was showing this complicated diagram of a conventional water utility building up the various costs between application fees, connection charges, infrastructure charges, and this new thing called offset allowance, and also allowance for having water efficient baths and showers and WCs within any house. And showing here, hoping it is still working in yellow, you can see that the water infrastructure charge, which is the charge to get the fixed assets to the right level, has dropped by 90% because developers and house builders showing they are using water efficient fittings. And then this income offset allowance, very strange thing, but saying the utility is making business out of this connection, it should make some allowance for that business. On this particular one, $1,000 per connection offset allowance. And part of the reason for showing this is everybody changes official connection fees to suit whatever policy is most important. It doesn't matter how you do it, but the policy has to be there and you adjust the connection charge accordingly. In my country, I've put in here, converted it through purchasing power parity to rupees to give you a sense of the different connection charges overall before some of those reductions. Very much depend upon the type of road or footway it is in. These things do make a difference to the water company, but they will have to learn to overcome it. And so in this context, with Chari, we did a study some years ago saying charging to enter the water shop, question mark. Do we get charged to enter the supermarket? No, they make their money for fixed assets office by a very small amount on everything we buy. Why do we charge people to enter the water shop? But we did find in that study this average $300 connection fee, which is utterly unaffordable to $1 a day households. Within that, the Friends in National Water Uganda recognized there was a challenge there, and they put a surcharge of 10% on the overall water tariff, and then said there will be free connections to households within a distance of 50 meters, apart from the cost of the actual meter itself. When they started, they were only doing 1,200 connections a month. When they changed it at that time, doing 2,000 per month, and overall, National Water had reached 530,000 meter connections, up from 50,000 over a 20-year period. Connection charges is absolutely critical. It makes a difference. Buenos Aires, Argentina, middle-income country, that privatized. They had connection fees of $500 for water. I'm picking up the JS's point about sewerage, but $1,000 for sewerage, which was cost reflective, but nobody could afford to pay it. And so in the end, they set up a $2 a month charge to all customers. So the service connection charge for water and sewerage could be reduced to $120, and that was paid at $4 a month. These are the sorts of automatic things people are doing around the world, just as you are describing very clearly. Some people have tried to escape household connections by doing electronic prepaid meters. Very nice, very well received by customers. They tend to break down rather often. South Africa had this experiment with filling up a 200-litre barrel once a day. Lowest cost, quite a clever way of doing it. An issue we'll come on to in a moment about how you manage consumption. Some people have been trying kiosks as a way of serving the poor. I think many examples in India as well. This one in Sierra Leone, sophisticated point of collection treatment system as well, with prepaid meters. But the challenge in all of this, if you look at it, the cost of a water kiosk and the attendant was actually more than actually giving everybody a household connection. We were getting trapped in old technology, old approaches. We have to move forward. Manila, Philippines, beginning to use meter banks, sometimes put on the boundary of informal settlements. If the municipal council didn't allow slum dwellers to be served directly, they could put these on the outside of the slum area, and then each household would individually put their own flexible pipe connection to their own meter, but more expensive than it needs to be. Somebody was asking in the questions about how do we get pipes into informal slums? And I heard the JS say, pipes are incredibly flexible, going through very small, narrow passageways. It's only when we get to sewerage that people in Buenos Aires, for example, had to start rearranging slum houses in order to get straight runs for sewerage. For water, it is not a problem. And so options for paying, I think we all know these: pay the full costs now, pay the full costs over a period, pay using a small loan through microfinance. For the low income, a specified group, pay only part of the costs with the remainder as above. These are the patterns we see in the world. And for a specified low income group, I believe the connection is simply provided free of charge up to the meter, and even better with a tap already included. The costs not borne directly by customers, partly by being funded by an increased volumetric tariff, or by government or donors increasingly using an output-based aid, payment by results approach, as already mentioned. Only when the connections are in does the money get released. But why are we doing all this? Just to remind us, why am I saying zero connection fees? We have to deliver public health. That is the job of a public water provider. The rich can always get enough water. It is our task to get water to the poorest to protect public health. We can only do that by 100% connections, only by the utility getting on with the task. But yes, only in designated lowest income areas. Middle income areas, developers doing expensive houses have to pay their full share. But piped water to premises of higher quality reduces diarrhea risk by 75% by one study from Karnataka. That is the goal. Karnataka did well. They put their connection fee in the poorest areas at the cost of providing meters to inculcate the sense of ownership. And then a subsidized consumption rate as well, and simplified procedures. It's a very impressive program in Karnataka, but that's from 10, nearly 15 years ago. Oh, we have to do better, all of us, to move on. And we are doing better. Odisha Watco has it right for below poverty line households, no connection charges. It is happening, it is doing, and even better, Watco has it right, even serving very informal housing, these ones in Puri, and finding a solution when there is no fixed wall to put a meter against. This is impressive, this is good, and it's better than most of what I see in the world, even in very simple houses. But I want to bring in this but. As soon as you go to continuous 24/7 water to very low income households, as well as to middle income households, leakage control becomes critical to manage: leakage of water and of revenue, if we're going to maintain and sustain continuous potable water service. And I would argue that the right to a free connection also comes with responsibilities, two critical responsibilities: one for the household, who have to learn how to use water wisely and to pay the affordable tariffs, and the service provider responsibility is to enable and support the household to manage the water and bills. And they won't do it without additional support. This is what global experience tells us. To show what happens when you lose control, this is typical frequency distribution profile for per capita consumption in the UK 30 years ago, non-metered, in the days before we had meters. And you see the long tail. And I did a quick analysis of all those people using more water than is the reasonable average. And it comes out, that's right, 26% of customers were using 50% of the water. And therefore that additional bit in the yellow band was approximately 56% leakage over on top of the fair amount. So unless we help customers, low-income customers particularly, manage their leakage, and examples I have seen in Bhubaneswar of where a small business washing cars and motorcycles was being done off a free connection. We have to be able to manage that sort of consumption, having given free connections. And so I came up with what I would call an ideal pro-poor, below the poverty line, house connection. Too many words there, so I put it next to some pictures, most of them from Bhubaneswar to start with. It is a public duty of a service provider to connect every house on the street. It is very valuable connecting every house on the street because it delivers efficiency. It's much cheaper to do it all at one go, put the pipe in, connect everybody. Another study from Argentina, child mortality fell by 24% in the poorest municipalities as a result of the increased household connections. The water meter needs to be on the outside wall, even if it's a non-house wall, for ease of reading and therefore efficiency of monitoring consumption, critical. Interestingly, it's usually recommended to fix water meters horizontally. They stay accurate for longer than if they are vertical. If you get best quality meters, it doesn't seem to matter so much, but medium quality, making them horizontal is the normal way. I've not seen that so often in India. And a tap on the end, and I would recommend for a low-income house, but where the tap is situated, there is a T connection. So pipe is ready to go through into the house itself in order to have drink from tap capability inside. The household will decide when it wants to do that. But not only does that give convenience to the customer, and if we're drilling for pipes anyway, it takes 10 seconds to drill through the house wall and make it available, but also that strengthens the whole assembly of pipes. The meter and the tap is more fixed to the outside of the wall because of that T going through internally. It works two ways. This example here, yes, it is on the outside of the compound wall, so it can be read. This example is inside a compound wall. They can't be accessed by meter readers or Jalsatis easily to monitor consumption, and that pipes are very vulnerable to damage, not being fixed to anything. There are now moves to use special containers to put meters inside walls for lower middle income households who have that extra wall. So they can be read from the outside, they are protected, the water comes through the backside inside the house. These sort of ideas could be thought about. Then something I've shared with some of you before, from Grenada in the Caribbean. Not only does this have a lockable consumer tap, it also has a lockable meter tap provided by the utility. So disconnection requires just seconds, turning the ball valve and locking it, and reconnection, you open it up again. How to ensure the rights and responsibilities of low-income households are managed. And here is my little picture building up. We have the tap, we have the horizontal meter, we have the lockable meter to enable customers to manage their payments. so they don't get into debt and they don't have challenges of full disconnection, which we all want to avoid. And to build into that, something I didn't mention last time we shared these ideas, you can build in a trickle valve. So it's not being fully disconnected, but it's less convenient. And then rather than filling a bucket, a 10-litre bucket in a minute, you might get a cup of drinking water over 10 minutes. Drink from tap remains. No one is ever fully disconnected, but we are managing the process and enabling people to manage their water bill and long-term conservation of water and revenue. Disconnections have been banned in my country, and I sometimes say the utility spends as much time on debt collection now, as it doesn't have this lever, as it does on water supply. That to me is going a bit too far. We can do better than that, I believe, with trickle flow locked meters. A security deposit, Shari has mentioned, that's used quite commonly in India. Here it's being used in San Diego, on this slide, in California. And as well as a security deposit, I recommend that part of the connection process is registering the mobile phone number. I don't know if it's 90% of people in a slum would now have a mobile phone or higher, you can tell me. But with that registration, they can then receive bills and reminders, and they can pay through mobile money, micro payments, to ensure their bill is there. Having paid the security deposit, the utilities now should never be in debt to these customers. They should always be positive, because the process will then be managed so that if they're going close to using up the security deposit, you can then ask the householder to do a micropayment and top it up again. An analog prepaid meter, mobile money, micropayments, and an example from Lusaka in Zambia, receiving in very simple, not very smartphone, the bill payment, informed about a water supply interruption, and where the balance is. So the customer is always understanding what is going on. No charge, of course, for these texts. Customers, low-income customers, need particular support. Odisha are doing wonderfully well with the Jalsatis. Now, if a Jalsati was given one of these handheld devices, not necessarily AMR, automatic meter reading, which gets quite expensive, but there is now this system whereby you can have software on a smartphone, which will read the meter, take the digits, automatically transfer it to the commercial billing software, and tell the Jalsati immediately what is outstanding on their bill. So in conversation, they can straight away inform the customer where they are doing, and if they are not going to be able to pay their bills, they could temporarily pause the supply, but still with a trickle flow supply, or they can accept the bill, see that it has been paid straight away, and the flow continues. Things to think about. It takes significant hand-holding and global experience in the early stages of pro-poor connections. And the Jalsatis are a fantastic way of doing it, to develop the habit of water conservation and bill payment, and to stop any misuse before it becomes endemic and leads to that long tail of overuse I was sharing earlier. So it's not disconnection and reconnection, it's a pause. The trickle flow is still there. Finally, just to remind ourselves that it is worth doing. Some anecdotal comments from Karnataka from 10 years ago now. This lady was very pleased to have a household connection, but being able to sell her water barrel and having more living space in her 10 square meter home. But on the right-hand side, this household not quite trusting the new supply yet. The barrel was still there. This lady was very pleased to have a household connection and very pleased to have a water bill, in those days printed, perhaps not needing to be printed now, which gave some degree of identification and status. This lady was very pleased to have a household connection but did not like having to pay. Nobody likes having to pay. But unless revenue comes in at some level so that low-income customers as well value this scarce water resource, it is very difficult to manage it and keep on top of it. And the girl on the right-hand side was just very pleased to have a water tap. Thank you for the time. This was my summation of my ideal pro-poor BPL. house connection. You're most welcome to argue against every point, but the reasons for doing it, I think, are very valid, the things we have to think about. Thanks, Chari. Back to you.
Thank you, Richard. We will share this slide, slides, of course, all delegates here, because there are some very, very meaningful lessons for practitioners. Some of the ideas about trickling the flow, a small gadget to, instead of a disconnection, but lowering the flow. I think these are some very good ideas that are available in India. It's no longer international. These technologies, these solutions are already available. The next event, the leadership seminar that we are going to do, is precisely on those. The practical startup solutions that can be low cost, but very, very high impact solutions that are available in India, made in India, tested in India, and also they can be replicated in India. For example, the gadgets that you mentioned actually are used in Mission Bhagiratha in Telangana to reduce the flow, but not disconnect. So I think these are very, very useful ideas. Thank you very much for sharing. Now, I think many of these ideas, in my view, have been doubted in a real life example, not only in one city, but at scale. And this is where I think bringing Mr. Mathivathanan sir at this time is super important, to convey to all the other cities and practitioners what can be done to universalize individual tap connection. As Richard said, it is a public health issue. We belong to what is called a public health engineering. We are not civil engineering, mechanical engineering. We are in the business of public health engineering. It means our business is public health, and we can get brilliant ideas from Orissa. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Chari. Thanks for very informative introductory presentation made by you. I could learn a lot of new things from today's presentation. What the kind of variety of barriers the state can build, how innovative the states can be in building the barriers. So it was very informative and very. Tara also has provided. Tara is providing a great, committed, passionate leadership to the water mission. So we are, in fact, we are grateful to Tara and Ministry that Government of India and Amrut 2.0 is coming up in a big way to promote universal pipe water supply coverage. So thanks to Mr. Francis also. He is part of us. He has been with us. We do consulting. Is the presentation visible?
Yes, sir.
You can see very well.
Okay. So as Professor Chari said, that at the state level, pan-state level, where we were, where we wanted to go, what all we did, what we have achieved in the last 4 years, and what are the learnings, and especially special focus on the urban poor, vulnerable, and the barriers that exist, how we broke the barriers. Like any other state, any other city, we also used to have this kind of shortage of water, no supply, low pressure, inadequacy, strikes, dharna, breaking the pH officers, all those things. Quality issues also were very common, especially during the summer and the monsoon, jaundice, hepatitis, diarrhea, all those things we used to have, and lots of hospitalization, admission, incidences of these cases, fatality, number of people dying, we used to have regularly. And the issue were that less quantity of water was supplied. Per capita available was very less. It was on an average at the state level, it was only 60 liters per person per day. And interestingly, the pipe network coverage was just about 40 to 50% only. That means majority of the areas were not covered with pipe network. That was the scenario in 2016-17. So that led to all these shortages. Whatever little was available, it was provided to the affordable area, the well-off area, posh areas, and the victims were the vulnerable, poor, slums. Those areas were deprived of pipe water supply and adequate water supply. And even that was the scenario at the state level. If you see amongst the cities at the state level, on the right hand side, you will find the cities in the blue color. Bhubaneswar capital, larger cities were getting adequate or more than required. Bhubaneswar was getting about 350 liters per person per day. Whereas the far off, we can say that like marginalized people, we also have marginalized towns, smaller towns, far away towns, Western Odisha, Southern Odisha, many towns, we are getting very little, 11, 15 liters per day per person. So that was the inequity prevailing throughout the state. So the first barrier we identified was the Odisha water policy of 2013. In 2015, we reviewed, that was the time Amrut mission, Amrut 1.0 mission was launched. And Amrut mission was an eye-opener for us. We implemented Amrut in 9 cities. Though we were very sad that it's implemented only in 9, leaving out remaining 105 cities. But we could get a lot of lessons, how to execute a universal coverage program, the step-by-step process, and the hierarchy of priorities, how water gets the drinking water gets the topmost priority. Only when you saturate it, you can move to the next priority. All those good lessons we learned, and we thought that such a wonderful program, how it can be limited to only Amrut towns, 1 lakh above towns, why not to other cities? Then we thought that, okay, Government of India may not be able to support, but the state has to do it. It is the duty of the state to do that. So we, taking inspiration from the Amrut, the water component, we devised our own policy. We decided that this policy, which was notified in 2013, which was to be implemented from 2015. The policy envisages that it would be a 3-phase implementation, starting from 2015 to 2027, and the full coverage network, the water available quality, everything was to be achieved by 2027, which was a long way to go, almost 12 years to wait. So we thought that it is too long and it's very unfair to make people wait for good quality pipe water supply when under another mission, smart city mission, we are investing thousands of crores in a smaller area with a per capita investment of 7 lakh, 8 lakh in the ABD area. It is a great injustice. So we thought that, okay, let us rewrite even before implementing this policy. So we thought that within 2-3 years, we should provide tap water supply to every household. It involves, and we were also very clear, learning from the Amrut mission implementation, that the only way to cover the last person is to have universal coverage. Unless you universally cover, unless you say that everybody would be covered, you will not be able to cover the poor and marginalized or the vulnerable. So that's the only way of doing. So we went ahead, did the planning, meticulous planning was done. The areas which are not provided with the network was surveyed. Then network requirements were estimated. Additional water requirement are been calculated. The thumb rule basis, how much fund would be required per kilometer, per meter of network, per MLD of water, also based on those kind of things. But at the ULB level, at the state level, we worked out the rough cost estimate for the entire state, and then we thought that it is worth investing in. So we listed the projects, did the rough cost estimate, and we wanted to be very sure that our PHO machinery is able to do the mapping of the entire city without leaving out any area, any slum, any. So what we did is that though the water supply program is implemented by the parastatal, the PHO, we thought that it should be presented in the ULB before every councillor, every corporator should see how many projects are the PHO is proposing, whether any area has been left out or not. A special meeting has been convened. All corporators were involved. The PHOs were asked to make a presentation before the council in their full council meeting. And then a council had to pass a resolution stating that the PHO has covered all the areas. The required areas are covered. Network projects have been included. And with the implementation of these projects, all streets, all lanes, all habitations would be provided with pipe water supply. That kind of the resolution, we drafted a model resolution and gave it to the council that you have to understand the proposals and then only you have to pass the resolution. Accordingly, we got from all the 114, then we took it to the Honorable Chief Minister, because this decision nobody else can take except the Honorable Chief Minister. So the political will is required to invest and to achieve that. At the bureaucratic level, this kind of the bill, administrative bill, is very difficult. So we approached Honorable Chief Minister, made a presentation. The Honorable Chief Minister appreciated. Then he recognized the need, and the timelines also. We said that within a period of 2 to 3 years, we'll be able to deliver. He gave the consent. Then only we went to the finance department. We went to the planning and convergence department for provision of for committing the fund after taking the political consent. Then the honorable programs, the Honorable Chief Minister launched the program. We have sold the dream successfully. This is the photograph of the launching, where 555 projects have been launched on October 20th, 2017. And the fund requirement were about 3,800. You will see on the left-hand side chart that every year the state used to invest only 100 to 200 crores roughly. And in this, under this initiative, we envisaged about 3,800 crore. Out of it, that is through convergence of Amrut, State Plan, District Mineral Fund, Mineral Bearing Area Development Corporation, UADSS, whatever funds available, the CSR, the MLA LAD, MP LAD, from various sources we mobilized funds. And then we started with the 555 projects, almost reached more than 928 projects as of now, out of which more than 90% of the projects have been completed by this time. We are in the fag end of completing the remaining one. The issues and challenges in implementing is that the PHO's capacity, the engineers and others, the capacity of the organization, huge constraints, but it's not so easy to enhance the capacity. We have not, I can say that we have not added even one engineer after that. Whatever was the usual recruitment, maybe we could have got about 15 assistant executive engineers in the meanwhile in the last 3 years, 4 years, when other departments also recruited from the pool. Otherwise, we have not added much capacity within the existing resources only. We had to manage. We did it. Again, the limitations of the contractors. Normally in the division, you will find very few contractors would be there, petty contractors or medium level contractors, and there will be kind of understanding with the local officials that whatever projects come, that would be distributed, and everybody would get some orders and they will be happy about it. So there is when we take up projects, 500, 600, 700 projects worth 3,000, 4,000 crore, then you can understand the sudden quantum jump in the number of projects and investment, the capacity of the contractors to execute. So we realized the need of that. And then we thought that the contractors cannot come from Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata to execute smaller projects in the urban local bodies. We have to mobilize locally. So we thought that why not we rope in contractors from other departments, the works department, the water resources department, irrigation department, or the rural development department. So then we had consultative meetings with those contractors and understood what are the clauses in our RFP which prevents them to participate. And then they have identified, and then we removed those things and made it a more liberal, welcoming clauses in the RFP. And then we bid. So with that we could break the nexus between the local contractors and the local grassroots level officials in tender fixing. And the earlier we used to get very high tender premium. Every PHO tender we used to have minimum 50% excess over and above the estimated cost. Sometimes it's more than 100% also. The reason was that it was an unrealistic estimate. The number two is limited number of participation. All those things with the tender transformation process which we took up, that could bring down high premium to low premium or no premium. In majority of all these 900 projects, if you see, not even 10% of the projects would not have got positive plus premium. It would have always plus or minus, maximum less than or plus or minus 3%, not above that. And earlier used to have lots of single bids, repeated bids, Even then, we used to get single bid. Now multiple bids, 7, 8 bids we used to get. And earlier the estimates were very unrealistic. We made it very, very realistic. Our people had to go to the field, see whether the roads are actually what kind of road, whether it is a concrete road or BT road or a earthen road. Accordingly, the estimates were made, and then it was so more realistic. We get better price. And earlier used to be a number of multiple projects of low value. We started clubbing the projects to arrive at the appropriate size of the tender, depending upon the availability of contractors and the interest of the contractors in that particular ULB. So we could bring lots of other department engineers successfully. And another major hurdle in executing such a large number of projects is that the government has banned departmental procurement of pipe, because several departments resorted to departmental procurement not linked to project, and their utilization of funds was only for procurement and keeping in the store. So at about 10, 15, 20 years ago, the finance department has banned the departmental procurement. And when we started implementing Amrut, we thought that in a typical water supply project, if intake well and the treatment plant is not there, especially in a network project, the value of the contract, 70% goes towards the material and 30% alone is for the laying or the work, the execution. So that prevented the contractors. They need to mobilize the funds, and once they invest, procure the pipes, it would take several months or even several years to get back that money. So that added to the cost of the project, cost of their bid amount. So we thought that why not we procure the pipe so that it lessens the burden of the contractors, and they invest only on the labor component, the wage component. So that would substantially reduce, and wage component, you can make the wages every week, every month. So you don't need much cash flow. So that has actually eased the execution process. So we went to finance department. We went to the finance department has twice rejected our proposal to do pipe procurement. Then we went to Apex committee headed by Chief Secretary and the Principal Secretary to CM. We placed our proposal that if you want speedy implementation, if you want full utilization of Amrut fund, Amrut scheme fund, and if you have to utilize full Amrut grant, then this special dispensation has to be done. Then finance department said why they don't want to allow this, what prevents them. Then they gave the list. I said that you give all these conditions, you give what are your doubts, then we will say, we will tell, we will commit to you what we will do to avoid that, and you review it after 1 year. We took based on the face value we have. So we got special permission after 2 rounds of rejection at the finance department and Apex committee level. So it was a huge risk we took to ensure that the projects are executed in time, speedily. So we started that with Amrut. We followed the same procedure with terms and conditions. We allowed the divisions to procure the pipe, clubbing the requirement of all the projects. That was a big, and in the first year itself, we could make a saving of 26 crore. And that was presented before the finance department Apex committee. And they appreciated, and then they subsequently allowed us to follow the same in subsequent years of Amrut, as well as in the state, the Basudha scheme also. So this has increased. This step has increased by splitting the pipe procurement and the execution. More number of eligible bidders could be mobilized, and the time also saved in procurement of pipe. There were also 2 cases of pipe procurement not floating the conditions laid by the finance department, and those executive engineers have been suspended and taken out of job for some time. That sent a clear signal to everybody in the machinery. So after that, we have not encountered any such deviation. And coordination, lots of coordination issues. We ensured that protection to the contractors against the harassment, local harassment for extortion of money, all those things we took care. And in fact, we invested, our heart and soul into this, drove this from the top. That could ensure that, you know, we created lots of WhatsApp groups, project-wise, depending upon the size, division-wise, and I was also part of that. We could also include the contractors in the WhatsApp groups, the payment issues of the contractors. They were encouraged to communicate freely, pending bills, running bill, harassment by the office, not paying them in time, all those things. The contractors were encouraged to communicate freely, and we intervened from time to time. Breaking the communication barrier and being in the same platform, that also has improved the quality of execution. That has given some kind of protection to the contractors also. And other coming to the barriers, what are all the barriers we could understand? The first thing is the land issue. So you have to the PHO was not giving connection because the land, the applicant does not own the land or the premises. They wanted some kind of lease agreement with the owner, and that cannot happen if the house is on encroachment, or for the slum dwellers cannot happen. We said that right to water, right to tap water, that we made as a policy, as an urban feature. Tap water as an urban feature. The hand pump tube well or the syntax, those are not urban features, they are all rural features. Only tap water at the household level, we said, is an urban feature. We will not sanction any hand pump tube well. That is what we made a policy decision, that no more hand pump tube well in the urban area, only tap water connection. So earlier, the honorable MLAs and the MPs used to come and take 200, 300, 500 the hand pump tube well numbers as sanction, and they go and distribute in their area, a kind of thing, you know, irrespective of the need, irrespective of the whoever demands, or wherever they want to show some kind of favor, they used to give that. That we stopped. We said that you take pipe water supply connection, we will not give you tap, we will not give you hand pump tube well. That we stopped, and then we said that every house has to get. If they have their own connection, then they have to give an undertaking. We need to have the photograph to see. Otherwise, it is a responsibility, onus on the part of the THO to ensure that every house is provided with the tap water connection. We said that everyone has a right to water, right to tap water. We said that all requirements can be relaxed, examined and relaxed. First thing we introduced is the relaxing the documentation requirement. Instead of the land ownership or lease, we said that you simply take an undertaking, indemnifying the PHO from all the litigation, whatever it is. With that undertaking, we should not bother about the land ownership or the ownership of the premises. Then if they are residing in that premises, if you have any proof from the voter ID or Aadhaar card, whatever it is, then you should give the connection. Then focus on urban poor. We started with the Amrut itself, that every slum household, urban poor household, we provided 2 taps, and it was included in the project cost. One at the kitchen, one at the toilet. Many household, of course, if the size is too small, then they prefer to have it in the just outside the house. And the connection fee has been completely waived for the urban poor. And for others, we said in installments, 36 installments, 100 rupees per month has been that. And another major thing is that road cutting permission. So normally as per the Orissa Waterworks rules, the onus of getting house connection was with the consumer. They have to apply for house connection. They have to get the house by paying the fee, sanction fee, scrutiny fee, connection fee, everything. There were a number of fees. Then with following the documentation process, then they have to go to the municipality, apply for road cutting permission. The road cutting permission, for that they have to pay minimum 10,000 to 15,000, 20,000 rupees, depending upon the type of road. If it is a cement concrete road, it will be 15,000 rupees. BT road, it will be much more than that. So that amount they have to pay to the municipality, then they get the permission, then they engage a contractor, then they execute the work, then the JE will come and inspect, and then make it an official connection. So that was the process. We understood that. We said that getting road cutting permission itself is a very cumbersome process dealing with the municipality. We said that it becomes the government's responsibility. We rewrote the waterworks rules, saying that house connection is a public work, no more a consumer's responsibility. And it was included as part of the project. Government insists, the government invested, and road cutting permission also has become the PHO's responsibility. And the municipalities were instructed by a single order that no road cutting charges would be paid. If road needs to be cut for providing this, the municipality will invest on the restoration of the road, and no further fund if required would be provided by the state through the state budget, not from the not linked to every connection. Accordingly, the waterwork rules have been amended. And another very important thing what we have done is the community participation. Initially we started with the Water and Sanitation Committee, Watson Committee. Then over a period of time, we graduated that to Jalsati. Mr. Francis also was dealing about that. Jalsati is a very successful model. I'll come to that. And then the approval process, administrative approval for the DPR also. Earlier, we used to every project was to be approved as an independent case, individual case. Now we said that all 555 projects would be processed as I say, in a lot, and there will be a composite bulk approval. In one file, in one process, we completed administrative approval of all the 500, and that list was enclosed with every DPR. The copy of that was enclosed, and it was certified. That's all. We simplified the bureaucratic process, which otherwise would have taken the file movement of 555 times, several tables, several functionaries, several ups and downs. We have also introduced third-party monitoring and quality verification to check whether the projects are physically executed or not. Is there not only in pen and paper, not in DPR, is also there in the ground with the geotagging and uploading of the photographs was done. And this is the camp, the water connection camp. We call it as a Jal Jogan Mela, the water connection camp facilitated by the women self-help groups in the ward areas. As and when the project is going to be completed, we organize this kind of camp to mobilize the application for connections at the ward level itself. But the JE or the concerned assistant engineer would be present, and the self-help group member, the Watson committee, the Jalsati or the Watson committee member was present to facilitate that, and they were incentivized for every connection. 100 rupees was given to the women self-help group. With that model, Watson committee model, we upgraded to Jalsati. They are our now partner in the water supply program. They act as a bridge between the consumers and the PHO or the BATCO authority. BATCO is a corporate we have floated, and that is managing 1/3 of the state now. So, and it's an incentive-based partnership with the Jalsatis. They take up the responsibility of reading the water meter, generating the bill, collecting the water charges. They are also provided with a field quality water quality test kit. So they do the water quality testing also in the field. Every test they conduct, they get about 20 rupees per test, and they also facilitate the consumer complaint redressal. We have about 400 Jalsatis in place now. So when we are implementing 800, 900 projects, investing about 3,000, 4,000 crore, how do we know that the DPRs are actually executed in the field? There are no fake execution. There are no execution in pen and paper. The project is executed, network is laid, and water is coming. Ultimately, what is important? It is not the pipe laying. It is not the production well. The production well or the intake well, the network, the treatment plant, storage reservoir, through the network, it should reach the consumer end, the houses. That's the ultimate. And the last house in that network has to get water, sufficient quantity with sufficient pressure. These are the deliverables. So whether that is being achieved or not, whether we have only made the investment, laid the pipeline network, but water is not there. production well was a failure, whether that is happening. So that for that only we have come up with this outcome certification, project outcome certification. It's a we formed a committee. Collector's representative was included. It could be Tahsildar, additional Tahsildar, BDO, additional BDO, or DRDA official, anyone from as nominated by the collector, the commissioner or the executive officer's representative, the concerned councillor or the corporator, and the PHO concerned engineer would be a member. These 4-member committee would visit the area and would physically see the asset and then visit the last house, find out from the public whether they are getting water or not after laying the pipeline, whether it is of sufficient quantity and sufficient pressure. That has to be recorded here, and all the 4 have to sign. Only when this is signed and then uploaded, then the project would be deemed to be completed, and then the last payment could be made for the contractor. So this is the process we followed to ensure that the projects are successfully, speedily
Mati sir, if you can
implemented.
If you can just close it.
I'm coming to the end. So this is what we have achieved, that 49 deficient ULBs are now providing sufficient water. 260 MLD of water supply has been, MLD of capacity has been increased. 6,000 kilometers of new pipe network have been laid. And 405 ml storage capacity has been added in the last 4 years. This is the very important, the last mile connectivity. The purpose of doing all these projects is only to ensure that the houses get the connection. See, in 2014-15, we started with the 310,000 connections. Then we implemented Amrut and Vasudha. Now we have crossed 9,05,000. We have the target of achieving 12,17,000 to saturate all 114 urban local bodies. In the meanwhile, Bhubaneswar and including Bhubaneswar, 27 towns have achieved 100% pipe water supply, including Puri, where we have given a drink from tap quality. This is the test done by the Bureau of Indian Standards, which said that Bhubaneswar is one of the best quality water. This is actually the outcome of all these things. The number of jaundice cases reported in the hospital. This information is taken from the integrated disease surveillance program of the health department. Number of diarrhea cases, jaundice cases, you can see how in 2014-15 it was in thousands, how it has come to into 2020 just 26 cases with no fatality. We used to have 29-30 fatalities on. So how we could reduce that. That's the impact of that. Now we have moved on to drink from tap and implemented successfully in Puri, and we have scaled up to cover another 17 towns, which would be roughly about 40% of the state's population. We are in the scaling up mode. With this, I complete. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thanks.
It was a fabulous transformational journey. 2 things I would like to sort of share with all of you. One, the time it took for this transformation often takes decades, but in this case, the transformation happened in the just span of 2.5 to 3 years. I think that's remarkable. I think that's what, once the state decides to do it, I think transformation is doable. We need good leadership, political and administrative leadership. I think that's a great example from India, where transformation can happen in a short span of 2 to 3 years. The second message I would take from the message from one of the slides Mr. Vativatanan has shown, the decline in the disease burden in the society. I think it's a very powerful slide. Often engineers ignore it. We look at only pipes and we look at water supply, but I think it's all about public health engineering. It is not a civil engineering. It is not a mechanical engineering. It is a public health engineering. And that slide, I think, is super important. Providing connection is a part of the public health engineering responsibility. As Dr. Richard said, it is about enhancing public health, that we need to give individual tap connection at home. Now, we bring in Natasha ji, CEO from India Sanitation Coalition, which is housed at FICCI. Ma'am, now you heard from national government, international perspectives, and you heard the transformation story of Orissa. Now, one of the major component in this is the cost of connection also. I mean, though Orissa somehow managed to get political buy-in and then devolve resources for this sector, but may not be all states have the same leveraging capability. Now, given this situation, what are the innovative ways in which to deal with this challenge of barrier, particularly the financial barriers that often households experience, not to bring the tap only to the house, but there's a lot of plumbing that goes inside the house, especially in poor house, it may not be long, but in middle class and lower middle class, they may have 2, 3, one in the kitchen, one in the bathroom. So there is certain amount of investment that we need to put in beyond giving a connection. So with this, I would like you to comment and reflect on some of the deliberations that you heard this evening. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chari. Honestly, listening to the three speakers before me, I have to say that the extent of the problem really doesn't need to go to the private sector. I mean, if I look at Orissa, it's amazing what a state can actually achieve, if it really wants to. So the leadership that they've been able to show can very easily be shown by other states as well. But having said that, I do agree with you that every state is not the same, and there is a need for private sector financing. I think the central government, specifically Mahua, has very clearly indicated that they want the private sector to be involved, and we are working with them very closely in ISC, given our role as facilitator between the private sector and the government, to ensure that wherever possible, we engage the private sector to come in and participate either through a PPP arrangement or otherwise in building up the infrastructure for the country. So let's just get down to the subject at hand. Just a couple of points that I want to for the listeners to keep in mind. Mr. Chari, he pointed out that the cost of connection is around 15,000, approximately around 15,000. And how much of this should come from the government and how much of this can we get the private sector to pay for? I think Ms. Tara was actually very good in giving us the central point of view. I think the center's view is very detailed. It's very, very, it goes down to a very granular level in terms of what should be achieved. And for the first time, I'm looking at something which is quite extraordinary, which is post-implementation monitoring and evaluation. And that is clearly something which shows that the center is very clear that it's not just about building, but it's also about maintaining and sustainability for the long term. So I think that is very clear. And I think Mr. Mati's example of Orissa actually brings out very beautifully how the state can actually go about ensuring that this can happen. Mr. Francis talked about international programs and how they've been able to achieve, success. But the biggest complexity is India. Everybody recognizes that. And I think, the no-cost tap, but charge for meter is something that I liked particularly when he spoke about it. So just 2 points that I want you to keep in mind from the national survey. 41% of urban households have piped water into dwellings as a principal source, but what happens to the rest? So we need to answer this question. And the second point is 91% have sufficient drinking water throughout the year from the principal source, but this is mainly from common taps. Now, there is a leakage issue, and we'll come to that in the presentation. Okay, so first slide, please. Yeah. So, just go on to the next slide. Right. So here is what last mile connectivity really tells us. When you look at the national sample survey, in the last round, they said that 94.2% of slum households get water from stand posts, bore wells, and bought water bottles. And that is clearly something that, sorry, if you can just go back. Yeah, just stay here. Yeah. So that is clearly the big conundrum that we are trying to solve. Urban water supply to slums is only approximately 5%. And we know that because of this, it is not sufficient to be able to meet the needs of the urban poor. specifically because there is a lot of leakage that happens with pipes. And I think Mati sir spoke about that in a bit of detail, where you have makeshift pipes, taps in slum homes, where secondary connections have been taken. And this is really where you get the issues around waterborne diseases and respiratory issues. Of course, this poses a bigger burden on health, morbidity, and mortality. So the center's response through the Jal Jeevan Mission is approximately, as you can see, 277,000 crores, with their share being around 76,760 crores over the next 5 years. And the balance has to either come from the state or it has to come from private sector partnerships that they will put in place, right? Next slide. Let's look at this ambitious timeline where they have said that they want to provide 100% water access across all the states in India. So they've made their announcement. They've merged the Atal mission. We've heard from Ms. Tara that now it's going to be called Amrut 2. And not Jal Jeevan Mission anymore. And that's all very good. But the first focused National Water Mission wants it to be around 139 crore households, tap connections, and 145 crore sewerage and septic connections. Now, I think it's really important for us to keep in mind that it is not, it's not only important to have a tap in the house. You have to have water. You have to have the ability to be able to move that water to the tap. So I think when you look down at the measurements that have been accorded across the city water balance plans and the city water action plans, the balance plans are effectively where they draw out the, the city plan, and the action plans are how they implement those, the blueprints. There are three things that they measure. They measure the number of household water tap connections, the number of sewer and septic tank connections, and the number of water bodies which are fully rejuvenated. So I guess you will understand that that linkage is very important. It's not just important to focus on the tap, but it's important to focus on the water that is going to come out of the tap as well. Outcome-based funding, of course, as I mentioned, this was excellent. I was really happy to see that 20-40-40, which is basically what they are looking at in terms of giving out the funding from this center. And most importantly, they're looking at a tech-based monitoring and evaluation platform called SCADA, which is going to actually monitor that things are in, coming to, are actually transparent in terms of what is being put on paper. So the weightage that they have given is around 55% for a water supply, which is really interesting, 40% for sewerage and septage, and 5% for rejuvenation of water bodies. So I think this weightage is very important to keep in mind when we are talking about water reaching the tap. Next slide, please. Right. So as I said, a tap is as good as the water it provides. And I'm just going to focus on the first project that has been announced, which is around providing universal piped water supply with household water tap connections. And the admissible projects that they've identified are, as you can see, given here. So water source improvement, freshwater treatment, water distribution system in uncovered areas, augmentation of existing water distribution system, a whole bunch of them, right? And what is interesting to note is that they are also talking about providing universal coverage of sewerage and septage management in the 500 Amrut cities. Now, this, as you know, has been brought into the overall program itself. Right. Next slide, please. Right. So what is our ground reality? I think Dr. Chari spoke about this with a lot of passion. The pay for connection. He's given examples about the different states and what they ask individuals to do. And what I've tried to do here is just, maybe give some ideas on solutions. These are our ideas, not necessarily things that are limiting. I'm sure that there are lots of other more brilliant ideas out there. But just to start off, is it possible for us to have one model for all states? Look at a standard initial cost for all APL and no charge for BPL. We've seen that it's been proven successful in not just India, but other parts of the world as well. So is that a possibility? And this is clearly for us to actually take to the center and see whether it is possible for them to drive it down with regards to the directives when they come out, because they're currently in draft. But when they come out, is it possible to make them mandatory? There is a tariff mechanism also, standard slabs for all states. Currently, as you know, there are different states have different slabs for charging tariff. And for metered states, this can be the case. For unmetered states, they can do a standard for BPL and a varied for APL. These are, again, as I said, some suggestions, and we can definitely add to these. The second procedural barrier that Dr. Chari spoke about was the property tax one. And I think that this is really clearly, when I was looking at what the states are doing today, it's disastrous, because the number of documents some states are asking for, there is no way that the slum dwellers are going to be able to provide them. Now, one thing the government did, which was brilliant, was the Aadhaar card. Pretty much everybody in India today has an Aadhaar card. And why can it not be the only document which is required when we request for a connection, when a poor person requests for a connection? This should be sufficient to be able to get him or her a tap connection. Then, of course, there is the tenure of land. Again, it's asking for land lease from an urban slum individual is completely ridiculous, given the fact that a lot of them are migrant labor and they have no access to giving to the property where they are staying. So they're asking for a tap because they're just staying there temporarily. There is no landlord, official landlord. So who is going to get them that tap? And the final one there is the information barriers. So again, as I said, migrant labor, little access to what they can actually go for under the government schemes. Is it possible for them to be able to get more information? How can we do this? Can the ULB offices, the ward offices, even the NGOs that work in those areas do a lot more advocacy around what they have the right to with regards to water? Next slide, please. Now, funding from the central budget, this is broadly, and please do remember that this is all in draft form yet. We still haven't got the final document. So I'm just showing you what this is, the proposed data looks like. So as you can see, this is the central allocation, depending upon the state size. And this is across the 4,378 cities that are covered under this program. Where I did see the ability for the private sector to come in is primarily around the reforms, technology, and IEC areas. And I'm going to talk a bit more about this in the next slide. Right. So these are the business models that I thought could be interesting, and I'd love to hear from the participants as well as my other worthy speakers, whether they believe that this is possible. Again, a lot of these business models are made up on the back of the experience that we have had working with the private sector in other areas. So definitely around wastewater treatment in the corporate area, in the urban area, around sewage, solid waste management treatment. These are some of the ideas that we have been putting in place, and it would be interesting to see whether this can actually work for the water as well. So the first one, provision of an additional tap from doorstep to inside the home, which is what Dr. Chari mentioned. Corporates are very, very keen to work in the CSR area. However, water and sanitation has always been a very difficult subject for them to understand, not because it's complex, but I guess because we have never, as a country, we have never really looked at corporate intervention in this space as we may have done with education or with children or with women, that's gender, or with nutrition or with health. But, so this is clearly, there is a need for massive advocacy in this space. And more importantly, we have to, when you talk to the private sector, you have to make them understand why it is important for them to, actually come into this particular area and add benefit. everybody knows that the quantum of CSR funds that actually go to the Prime Minister's fund year on year, because corporates have been unable to deploy them, is massive. It's staggering. Why can't part of those funds be used for projects in the urban space, specifically because corporates and their employees are actually utilizing those areas? So, one of the business models that we have proposed here is corporates to use their CSR funding to provide additional plumbing and the second tap within the home, with the user being charged for usage of water rather than the initial fixed cost for fixing the tap in the premises. So that's the first one. The second is on a PPP partnership for laying of dual pipes. Now, this is again with regards to the experience we've had with wastewater treatment. This is about laying dual pipes, one for the supply of water to each household and the other for wastewater collection to a central point where it can be treated. And there are several models that are now have been input successfully in various tier 2 and tier 3 cities, where we've actually been able to use the existing workforces that are doing manual labor, automating it, and actually being able to provide these facilities. So the business model here is for the private sector to bid for tenders to lay the pipes at a cost plus model to the ULBs and balance to be adjusted against their CSR reserves, currently at 2% of the overall profit of any corporate, as you know. So this is a model which is very workable and something that we are now proposing to the corporate sector as we speak to them. The other business problem there is the PPP for wastewater treatment to reduce overall cost of water for municipalities, which equals to lower tariffs for water usage and then a lower usage of groundwater as well. India's got the most abysmal track record for the usage of groundwater. We have to seriously look at that problem, and that's a whole different conversation altogether. And how are we going to be able to do that? How can we reduce our usage of groundwater today? And the business model that we proposed here is for the ULB to pay for wastewater to be transported to the corporate. So we've talked about the dual pipeline system. Corporates to treat the wastewater based on the infrastructure that they already have for treatment of their own industrial wastewater and supply it back to the ULB at an adjusted cost against their need for pure water for their own operations from the ULB. So it is a circular economy. It is something that can be done. In fact, some of our large corporates have already started doing it some years ago, and there are many more corporates today who are looking at this from a benefit perspective to the communities that surround their factories and their other premises. The next one is mapping of water bodies, allow for accurate measurement of water available versus water required, and hence costing of water can be done more accurately. And the business model that we are proposing there, again, is not something new. In fact, in a lot of cities, Bangalore, for example, you will see that corporates have adopted water bodies over a long-term CSR program in the vicinity of their offices and factories, and they're working with the ULBs to ensure that the quality of water becomes far cleaner than what it was when they started out. So this is again something that I believe is very easily doable and that we can take up in a major way. And the last one, and I won't say it's my favorite, but it's honestly one that we are very excited about because we are working on this quite actively at the ISC, is technology-enabled water reforms, be they smart metering, reduction in NRW, and promotion of startup building innovations for WASH. The ULBs actively need to work, and I think I can't remember whether it was Ms. Tara. Ms. Tara mentioned this, that they were supporting startups in a very big way as part of the document. And this is clearly something that we are very keen to take forward. So we have started our own campaign within the ISC, which we will be announcing this year. And these are the startup awards for the water and sanitation community. Going forward, we will be awarding 3 awards every year to accelerator level startups who have built their prototypes and are going to take them to market, to be able to work more innovatively within the water and sanitation field. We hope with this to be able to encourage and motivate a lot many more young technocrats, young entrepreneurs to come up with ideas to be able to bring forward successful innovations for this sector. This is not only about technology, it's about process as well, because in WASH, it's not just technology, but it's process also, which if it is made more efficient, can lead to major benefits. So that's, I think, my last slide. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Natasha ji. She has brought in two interesting ideas. One is she has given very practical insights of how to address the barriers. I think equally important, she brought in some interesting perspectives. As we know, the mission, Amrut mission, Amrut 2.0, has a financing mechanism, as she said, wherein a maximum of 1/3 to 25% of the central assistance will come from Government of India, and the rest of it has to come from the state and the ULB put together. And she brought in an angle of private sector participation, corporate social responsibility participation. Except for UTs as well as northeastern states, the financing for other states are in the range of 25% to 33%. So I think her idea of introducing private sector at different levels, I think is very, very relevant and very practical. Thank you very much, ma'am, for bringing me. Now, I think we barely have time to take questions. I now pass on to Dr. Malini. There are quite a few questions addressed to Mr. Bhattivatanan, Dr. Richard Francis, all the participants, all the speakers. To you, Dr. Malini, would you like to pick up some relevant questions and moderate this?
So, sir, I've just clubbed the questions, observations, and these are open for all panelists to respond to. So first was from Mr. Amrut and Ms. Vandana with regard to slums with narrow approach road and slum households which don't have any entitlement. How do we provide for them? So Ms. Tara did mention about connections and pipelines being above the ground. Ms. Natasha brought out some suggestions, and Mathi also spoke in detail about how they are taking this up. But if any of the panelists would like to reinforce any points in response to this, please.
I think Mathi sir is the best person to answer. Over to you, sir.
So when we started discussing about providing pipe water supply in the slum, the opposition came from the municipal functionaries and the PHO, stating that it is an encroachment. So it's a public land or forest land, how can we give? So that was the reason to oppose for laying road, providing water supply, providing street lighting. So my argument was that today, if you have COVID, if you have to move the ambulance or if there is a fire in the slum, will your fire tender go or not? If there is an epidemic, if there is a jaundice, if there are some accidents, some death, your ambulance will go to that house or not? Will go inside or not? Or will you say that it is an encroachment, we will not touch? Will the police, if there is a criminal case, will the police will enter into that area or not? Will you say that it is an encroachment, we cannot go? So when you want to go, you will go. When they want infrastructure facilities, you will say that it's a government land or encroachment or forest land. So for providing this to enable, my argument was that to enable an ambulance to reach, to enable a fire tender to reach, to enable a police vehicle to reach, we need to lay the road. We need to give the street lighting. Once you have the road is the carrier for the pipeline. So all our pipelines travel in the road only. That is the right of way. You don't need separate land for it. So that is how we started providing infrastructure in the slum areas. So that is because of the realization that the slums are the backbones of the cities. They built the city. All the roads were built by them. All the buildings were built by them. All infrastructures came because of the slum dwellers. From where you got the workers, skilled, unskilled, semi-skilled, all came from the slum. We should have provided housing. We have not provided housing. That's the reason that they have put up their own housing. So that was the argument we started, and then we could succeed. There is no opposition.
Thanks. Thank you. So the next, it was more of a comment actually from Mr. Madhusudan Reddy, who said that Telangana has implemented Mission Bhagirath to provide water supply, but how many households are actually connected is not very clear. Mr. mentioned that reporting on project completion is much stronger than measurement of outcomes. Would you have any other, would any of the panelists have any other response to this?
So measure the outcomes, as simple as that. And that's exactly what Taraji has mentioned. I think that's a great change where incentives and investments are going to look at outcomes rather than infrastructure implementation. So I think that's the way
change is coming.
Change is coming. I think it's a matter of time that most of the future projects are going to look at outcomes rather than investment per se or projects per se.
Mr. Harshvardhan from AP had shared a leading practice saying that in Andhra Pradesh, the application process has been simplified and there's been a linkage to property tax assessment number. There were some questions in response to that saying, is that still operational and all that? But if any of the panelists would like to respond to it, any experiences you would like to share? I
just like to direct the question to Mr. Madhuvatanan. The point you are mentioning, Mr. Madhusudan, is that you need a property tax certificate. Itself is a barrier. So I leave it to Mati sir. How do you respond to that?
Here the objective is to increase your property tax collection or to provide water connection. You want to use this opportunity to bring them under the tax net and then increase your revenue collection, or you want to give water connection? That's a simple question. What do you want? Is it an enabling policy measure or a prohibitive? You are only shutting the door by putting condition and additional requirements. So see, the one thing we need to understand that all the illegal, the moment the pipe network is laid, people will get water. If there is a pipeline in front of my house, either I get water from the stand post or the PHO grassroots level, informal worker or the outsourced employee, whoever it is, he will come in the night time and provide me an illegal connection. So if official connection is not there, unofficial connection would be there. So it is in our own interest, we need to provide the connection. We have to call them and we have to give them connection, and then we have to give them some chocolate also. Take this, but take connection. You have to incentivize. Otherwise, what will happen? At least your monthly fee will not come. You will not get the user charges. First thing is that they will puncture your public water supply pipeline. They will puncture. They will use substandard material. They will use untrained plumber and cause contamination point there. They will create a contamination point, number one. That will endanger the public safety. Number two, they will remain outside your user charges net. They will remain as an illegal connection, unauthorized connection. Since it is unauthorized, they will install a pump and then start sucking the water. And there would be a lot of leakages. They will not bother because it's not measured. It is an unofficial. So it will lead to a lot of wastages, losses, irresponsible usage. It is in our own interest that we should bring them under the official net. That's the reason we should break all the barrier and give them connection. It is beneficial. Financially, it is beneficial.
Thank you, sir. Very strong and very clear message.
Marley, I have one question,
yes,
which is directed to Dr. Richard Francis. many of participants are engineers, and they don't like cutting the roads, because the minute road is cut, it is a potential nuisance. The water will seep in and it damages the whole place. And laying the road is always there is always a time lag, creating a lot of problems. Now, globally, there are a lot of changes that have come in terms of road drilling activity, particularly oil and gas industry. Even in India, they do a lot of innovative ways of road cutting. Is there any way, would you like to share some thoughts on how do I avoid road cutting but still put a pipe under the ground? As much as possible.
I know you know the answer because we had this conversation offline. But I asked you the question, is India using directional drilling to get water pipes under concrete roads to stop the cost of road cutting? And I had shared earlier the slide of the variations of cost because of a reinstatement of roads in UK connections. It was changing whether it was in grass verge or footpath or road. And if you simply have a cheap directional drilling machine, which works so efficiently, so cheaply, it happens on the road outside here when somebody had a new connection to their horse trough for their field. The water company came along, just drilled underneath, normal stuff. And I saw in Bhubaneswar, my last visit there, the gas company going along the side of a road, not cutting through people's concrete driveways, just directional drilling all the way through. Is the water sector using that? If not, why not?
Yeah, thank you. So my next question again is directed to Dr. Richard. Actually, one of the participants here, Mr. Chanchal, is from WaterAid. I don't see him in the list. He may have dropped out. He mentioned about a good practice from Uganda regarding the prepaid meter-based public posts. I was wondering if you would have any information and if you could just share with the participants on that.
If it worked, I shared a slide showing a prepaid meter. I think it was from Kenya rather than Uganda, but the same system. And customers really like them. They really like being able to control their spending. They pay for a token, a little bit at a time. They get water out of the standpost. And so customers really like them. The cost of them and the cost of maintaining them is high. And that's why I try and look for this analog prepaid approach on a meter. But they work. I am not recommending them because you are trapping people in an old way of doing it. When we now know, and Odisha has shown so wonderfully, you can just do it straight and get the water to each individual household. So I think, although it looks a very modern technology, it's actually an outdated transitional approach, and we can do better. And I have seen India is doing better.
Thank you, Dr. Richard. We had several questions from Colonel Naresh here. One, of course, he was recommending for very strong IEC activity to bring discipline among citizens and to be able to sustain any interventions taken by a town. But he has two specific questions which are yet to be answered. One is this impact of peripheral growth and how does the city extend the services when it has planned for. Professor Chari mentioned it should take, master plan should take care of it, but if there are any further responses. And then one specific question he has for Mr. Mati is his views on water mafia and does it exist and how do we handle it? Any thoughts on that?
I gave my reply there itself, that I laughed and said that you should ask water mafia what they do, how they have dealt with me. The water is, the more it is scarce, more business, more money. So on saturation mode, once you are determined on a mission mode, they also see it and then, so they will shift business. They'll find out some other remunerative one. So otherwise, doing this is not possible.
So,
just on the point of, I just like to reflect on what Colonel Naresh said, and I will direct it to some of our panelists also. As the city expands, the growth is always faster than the way water sector responds. And if you have a policy of universal connection, individual tap connection as a right, how do we cope with it? Because cities are expanded at exponential growth. Water sector investments are not always keeping pace with that growth. So will it create any disparity in the peripheral areas versus core area? That was, what he's trying to hint. Richard or Mati sir, anybody?
Sir, I didn't get you.
So the point is, sir, is the peripheral areas are growing at a very rapid
Yes, right.
Network investments are not really keeping pace with this growth. So when you have right to water tap, how do we deal with that situation?
See, whether it is urban area or rural area, you need to provide water. That's the duty of the government. It's a welfare state. So how does it matter whether they are at this side of the urban local body or the other side of the urban local body? The city would continue to grow. So the only thing is that if it is far away from your main habitation, from your main source, then taking the network may not be very, feasible. It may be very expensive. So you may go for a production well there and a localized network there. That may be cost effective. But nevertheless, the tap water should be given. That is what we do for rural area. That we should do for peri-urban also.
So a decentralized source augmentation and network. Yes. In a localized way is the most.
That's the solution. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, Dr. Malini?
Yeah. So, Mr. Gopal Krishnan, are you able to unmute yourself? He wanted to share a leading practice from Coimbatore, and I thought it would be interesting for all of us to listen in. Mr. Gopal Krishnan, are you there and are you able to unmute? Yeah.
Good evening, Gopal Krishnan from Coimbatore. We are implementing a 24/7 water supply project under PPP mode. As part of the concession agreement, cost of the water house service connections, the service pipe, meter, everything is included in the project cost. The consumer has to pay only the deposit as per the corporation water supply bylaws. The cost of connection, including road cutting, pipe cost, meter cost, labor, everything is borne by the concessionaire as part of the project cost. Just I wanted to highlight that.
Thank you, Mr. Gopal Krishnan. How much is the deposit as per the bylaws?
4,000.
Is it for urban poor or everybody pays 4,000?
It's really, there is no poor or rich differentiation, uniform. And so, this bylaw is in existence from 2013. It's not a new one.
It's not a new one. So, Natasha ji, this is the time you need to step in. 4,000 can be sometimes challenging as a one-time payment for urban poor. Do you have any nice project to help them to access pay this 4,000 rupees to the private operator or to the municipality to get connection? Are there any microfinance products available in the market?
So there are two ways to look at this, Dr. Chari. One is a microfinance product, which is effectively something that eventually has to be paid back as well. The other is a grant around CSR, so getting corporates or other private sector entities involved. Given that this is an urban space, the potential to get either of these two is fairly possible, right? It's the rural areas where we normally have a problem getting additional financing. But as far as it's an urban space, either of these two options is possible. I would not go for the microfinance primarily because payment, when it comes to paying back, it becomes an additional burden on the individual, right? Because you have to take the credit on yourself. First of all, banks will not give it because you don't have a credit worthiness. So effectively, you have to build it through an MSME, or you have to have a NGO who is willing to give it to you. So there are all these particular areas that need to come in. But the CSR route is very doable. if we find the right corporates, and this is what we have now started to experiment with across various states, find the corporates working in those areas, work with them towards building the communities that surround them. So I don't know about this particular Coimbatore experience. It's interesting to note that they have actually got this 4,000 deposit. But what I would urge them to do is to actually look at this as a viable option. It is more sustainable going forward. If the fixed cost is paid, the corporate also gets to invest its CSR funds in a meaningful way. It gets a tick off from their own board with regards to their expenditure and doesn't have to put that money back into a central fund, which we all know is there, but it's not the right way to do things, right?
Mr. Gopal Krishnan also had one more interesting angle, that property tax assessment is mandatory to get water connection in Coimbatore. I think you need to work on this, Mr. Gopal Krishnan, taking inspiration from Orissa and other places.
Yes, sir.
I think the real thing is that we should help Mr. Gopal Krishnan by taking this up at the center. So if Ms. Tara was here, I would actually urge her to look at this whole documentation issue, because every state has it. And, it's something that we really need to tackle from the center, for the center to make it mandatory. I don't know whether it is possible, but I do think that is the right way to go. Sorry, Mr. Gopal Krishnan.
We have compiled practically for all the states about documentation issue. I didn't want to embarrass myself or other partners. There are quite a few weird documentation requirements, which I think can be very, very regressive for everybody, even not only the poor, but even middle class to produce such documentation. I think, Taraji, we will submit a concept note of how to ease the documentation, which can be embedded in the national guidelines. Thank you. Dr. Malini, over to you.
So, President, this is the last point from my side, and this is directed to you. This was from Ms. Sophia. Unfortunately, she's not there. She seems to have dropped out. So her question was that how can we, as members of the Change Management Forum, how can we connect the various aspects such as rainwater harvesting structures, RO with wastewater systems? How can we take all these approaches and promote a holistic approach, a habitat approach, and how can this platform enable that? I thought it was a relevant question, and the last amongst the questions, if you could just...
No, I think it's a very valid question. In a way, in my view, this is already addressed in the presentation of Taraji, as well as Natasha ji also mentioned about it. Is something called City Water Balance Plan, which looks at a combination of sources available within the jurisdiction in a regional approach, not just a municipal boundary, but a regional approach. To combine resources available above the ground, below the ground. It could be rainwater or it could be surface water. And then we need to look at it in a conjunctive use of water rather than going further and further and further away. Because the marginal cost of bringing water from distances away from the city is going to increase. For example, Bangalore brings 200 kilometers away, Hyderabad brings 200 kilometers away, from 212 kilometers away to feed the water in the city of Hyderabad. And this cannot work in the long run, because the cost of sourcing water is going to be very, very expensive. And the power cost is going to be very expensive if you have a multi-stage pumping. So given that, the water balance plan promoted by Government of India is a very, very right entry point to start re-looking at water resource management in a conjunctive use manner. And her point about looking at rainwater, surface water, and decentralized water source management is a way forward. I think the City Water Balance Plan is actually trying to do it. And how far we bring that approach, an integrated approach in a real life context, is something we need to look at. Probably Mr. Mathivathanan should set an example of a good practice in terms of a real city water balance plan, how it looks like in a real life practical context. Theoretically, it has been discussed for the last 20 years in academics, but in operationalizing in India, unlike in Amsterdam, unlike in other places, in Indian context, as I think we ignored nearby resources and we kept going for sources away and away from the city. I think this is one area she made a very valid point, Dr. Malini, I think we need to work on.
Yeah. And although in our session plan today, we were to spend half an hour on developing an action plan, actions that we could take at a state level and city level. This is to Mr. Krishna Mohan, who has just placed a comment. So apologies, Mr. Mohan. I think we will reconvene for just a participant session where we can all discuss and develop. Cities who are looking at developing plans, we will plan a session. But before I close, Professor Chari, one more point. Can you please share a little bit about what the next webinar would cover? When we say innovations, what type of innovations and what are we planning? If you could just share a little bit on that.
No, I think it's very simple. As Tara mentioned about it, and Natasha ji also indicated, there are very, very practical solutions available on the ground in India and outside also. We need to collate them. We need to bring into a common platform and curate them in a real life situation. And, as we know, we have been interacting with a lot of startups. We are interacting with innovators. It's time that we need to create a platform for them to work with the cities, to work with the water utilities, to work with the communities. Some of the business models Natasha ji has shared can be operationalized through these innovators. And that's going to be the conversation for the next event. It's not going to be the practitioners all the time. It is the innovators who are going to speak, and practitioners will listen to what are the stories and what are the interesting ideas that they have. So we're going to reverse the conversation next time, wherein the city practitioners, state level practitioners can absorb and see how these innovations can be contextualized in a real life situation. That's the conversation, Dr. Malini, we are going to have in the next round. Next month, every month we will have one.
Thank you, Professor Chari. My last task to you is to please close the program by thanking all the panelists and all.
No, I just like, it is their program, so we just facilitated, we heard, at least personally, I got inspired listening to all of them. Thank you very much. And so many people staying back beyond the period after 2 hours is something demonstrates the interest that our panelists have created during this. And thank you very much, Dr. Richard, Natasha ji, and of course, Mati sir for staying for so long. And thank you very much, I think she got a call from the secretary, so she couldn't stay for a period, but she conveyed that she's deeply interested in knowing some of these good practices so that it can be embedded in the Amrut 2.0. So thank you once again, all of you, for staying, and then see you next month.
Thank you very much. And we are here also joined by Ms. Preeti, who is helping us in putting the proceedings together. We are a little delayed in getting the first events proceeding, but we will ensure we get both of these to you within the next 10 days. So thank you very much, and we look forward to connecting with you again. Thank you.